Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Children, Young People and Family Scrutiny panel. Before we start these proceedings, may I bring your attention to some housekeeping matters. There is no expected fire alarm testing today. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please follow the fire and emergency procedures that are applicable to the Council House. Please can I also ask that you use your microphone when addressing the meeting and then switch it off when you're not using it, and that your mobile devices are turned to silent, please. Before we move to the business today, I've been asked by Councillor Sally Creswell to point out the 10 wishes, which kind of dominate that corner of the room, rightly so. They are the wishes of the young people of Plymouth, and we as adults are committed to delivering those as best we can. So it's good to have that as a reminder. Also, can I congratulate Amanda Davis on her recent appointment, confirming her as the permanent Plymouth Service Director for Education, Participation and Skills, and also welcome Lisa Davies to the panel. She's taken up the post of Service Director for Children, Young People and Families, so welcome. Okay, so moving to item 1 on the apologies. Jake, do we have any apologies for today?
No apologies, Chair.
Excellent. And item 2, any declarations of interest? Are there any councillors that have any declarations of interest in respect to any of the items on the agenda? Councillor Noble?
I'm a school governor at St Matthew's. I don't know what the full name of St Matthew's Primary School. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Thank you. Item 3, the minutes meeting that took place on the 16th of July. Does the committee agree to the minutes from the last meeting? Can I get a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Steele to propose, Councillor Taylor to second. Thank you. And can I see a vote of all councillors to accept those? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 4, Chair's urgent business. There are no items of Chair's urgent business, so we can start the meeting properly. We're joined by 5 young people at the end of the room. I haven't introduced them properly, but you can see that it's great to have them once again at our meeting, and they will go first in terms of asking questions. I'll invite councillors after young people have had their turn. So the item is Plymouth Attainment Report. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Creswell to introduce the report. Over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Bly. Thank you. And can I say, first of all, welcome to our young people who are here, and stress that really what we're talking about here is actually your achievement, your hard work, your commitment and support. And we know that there's support of your teachers and families, but this is primarily, this is down to you and the hard work, and we are really, really proud of you all. So as we pause for a moment and reflect on the journey we've made together, it's impossible not to feel, as I keep saying, a deep sense of pride and gratitude. The progress we have been making in Plymouth this year is nothing short of remarkable, and it's thanks to the unwavering commitment, determination and collaboration of our school leaders, our children, families and local area partners, but most of all of our children and young people. Together we've created real tangible change. We've seen the difference in classrooms, in communities and the lives of children and young people across our city. Let's take a moment to celebrate just some of the incredible achievements from 2024-25. So first of all, more children are achieving a good level of development in their early years with stronger outcomes in both literacy and maths. Those are the early learning goals, and those are about our youngest children who are in the foundation stage. In year 1, that's our next age of children, more pupils met the phonics screening standard, and over half achieved a higher score, a fantastic foundation for our lifelong learning. At Key Stage 2, attainment's improving across all areas, and at Key Stage 4, attainment 8 is rising, with Plymouth expected to be in line with national averages. Our basic measures are projected to be in line with or above national, and outcomes for disadvantaged pupils are well above national in the 4+ measures at GCSE. At Key Stage 5, progress measures in A-level and applied qualifications are expected to be above national, and a powerful indicator of aspiration and achievement. We also need to celebrate our children in care, which I think we will talk about perhaps more in a moment. So more children in care have actually gained the qualifications they need and secured post-16 pathways. More care leavers are choosing to continue their learning beyond age 18, showing belief in their futures and confidence in their potential. These outcomes are not just numbers. They represent real stories of real lives and real futures, and they reflect the resilience of our children and the dedication of our educators and the strength of our community, and shows what we can achieve together. However, we can always achieve more, and we are, and you are, and all of us are really ambitious for our children and young people. And progress is good, but we want to see even more. And I'm going to finish by saying again how very proud I am of all of you. And in many ways, I wonder if it would be appropriate that we could actually think of a whole round of applause for all of our children and young people in this city who have worked so hard to produce such great results for themselves, and are a complete credit to us. So thank you very much indeed.
And before I hand over to Stuart Hogg and the young people, what is noticeable is that these results are significant, in particular the Year 11 results, given that those young people were children in Year 6 in lockdown in 2021. So massive impact in terms of their education, and that needs to be recognised and celebrated. Stuart, can I hand over to you for introductions and for your questions?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Blight. So yeah, just as an introduction, as a participation team, we worked with young people, but before we did that, we created a set of workshops so we could really get to the bottom of what this report says, so young people could understand and really begin to think about it in a critical way. And we linked that to previous work that they've been involved in, previous comments that have been made, and other pieces of work, including some of the campaigns that have been run by young people in Plymouth at the moment. So work was undertaken in Youth Parliament and in our Listen and Care councils, and it has generated quite a lot of questions that we had to whittle down. So we did whittle down to 5 because we didn't want to be here all night and take over the whole meeting. But I know Amanda Davis has agreed to come to the individual groups to answer any further questions. And I think some of that was in relation, the report refers a lot to the results being finalised and further information. Some of the questions relate to that, so we think it would be appropriate to happen after that. And none of us, I don't think, well, some of the young people really impressed me with their maths abilities when we were doing the workshops. The speed of working out ratios was incredible, but it is in relation to our interpretation of the data. So the first question is from Sienna, and this is a question that's generally about the whole report.
Thank you, Stuart. So I'm Sienna, and my question is, how can we report these findings to schools and young people in a young people friendly way? As the document was a lot to read and there was lots of jargon. It would be good to do this when we all have the data, including different genders and people with SEND needs, as we noticed this was missing and we would like to see this.
I think that's a really excellent question, Sienna. It's the interesting thing is that what you've actually asked wouldn't just benefit young people. I think it would benefit a lot of adults as well, being able to see things without some of the jargon in. We tend to get, because my background is one in that I've been in education for a long time, tend to sort of look at these reports and put them together, and perhaps don't necessarily think about how readable and how easy it is to get the key data and the key messages out, and things like, for example, terms like validated data and all sorts of other jargon that's in there. And I think that's, not only do I think that's a really good question and something that we could certainly work on and take up on, I think it would be useful to have a report of that sort of nature that would be available as well to counsellors, wider to perhaps to parents and such, and carers who'd be able to actually read that data and take it in and use it, and would find it really advantageous. So I think it's worthwhile us actually taking that away, and taking that away probably as an action, really.
Isabel, did you want to say something too?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think that that's a brilliant idea, and I think it would be a great way of celebrating all of the hard work of the young people and the children that have really obviously worked very hard to get these results. So yes, I'd love to do that.
Happy with that, Sienna? Did you want to come in, David? Sorry.
Just comment. I think there was a second part to your question, which was about making the information accessible, but including the results for children with perhaps some particular needs and in particular groups. And you mentioned SEND. So I think there's something there also, that when we bring back the more comprehensive validated report to Scrutiny Board in the new year, we will have as much analysis as we can about the achievements of children from some very particular groups. And we will, Councillor Woods, endeavour to get as much trend data in that analysis as we possibly can.
Councillor
I'd
Crystal?
just add as well that one of the things that Sienna picked up was including gender as well. That's to be included. So I think that's also something that's important, and that's significant to schools as well.
That's great. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so our next question relates to page 7 of this particular report, and I'm going to hand over to Chesney.
Right. What does disadvantage mean, and why is there no attainment 8 data for this group? Is it because it's not measured, or don't disadvantaged people reach this level?
Hiya. So disadvantage relates to children that have been eligible for free school meals in the last 6 years, children in care, and children previously looked after. Okay, so that's what we're reporting on when we talk about disadvantage. So there is attainment 8 data for disadvantaged cohorts, but we don't have it available at the moment. So we haven't been able to report on it. Okay, but once we get the complete data set, we'll be able to provide that for you.
Can I ask, is it also worth at this point explaining what Progress 8 data is? Because it's missing from the report. I know it says it in the report why, but we may have people observing who haven't read the report.
So Progress 8 tracks the progress. It does what it says on the tin of children from a kind of baseline point, and the kind of value added piece, really, in a nutshell. That's what Progress 8 means. It's missing this time because of the COVID situation. So the children who are in lockdown didn't have that kind of baseline in order to establish that. So that's why it's not been reported this year.
So does that mean we're unlikely to get it at all then in terms of this? But is there a comparable kind of way of providing success of disadvantaged children?
Yeah, there would be. We would start with the baseline and work from there. But I think next year is the final year where we don't have Progress 8 measures, and then they'll come back in. So.
Okay, and the next question's from Dylan and also relates to page 7 on the report.
Hiya. We are happy that performance for disadvantaged group is going up, but what can be done to make it go up faster and to catch up with mainstream? Do you also know why mainstream performance isn't improving as much as we would expect?
Thank you. I've forgotten to introduce myself last time. So Amanda Davis, Service Director of Education, Participation and Skills. So I'll start this question, then Isabel will pick up. I've forgotten the question already, having introduced myself. Look at that, but it's in front of me. So we're obviously very happy, as you are, that disadvantage has gone up. And do we know why, and can we do more? Is kind of the question, isn't it? So we are very happy, but we are, like you, really ambitious for every single child in our city. Everybody counts. So we have really strengthened the oversight and our ambition as a whole city and a whole education community. So we have a new leadership group that we now converse with, and that's all the chief executives of all the multi-academy trusts in the city. And we come together now termly, but we came together this term and really stated our ambition for every single child. And we did talk about every single child. So we talked about, very high level ambition for everyone to do well, but we had helpful challenge about how can we be sure that every single child from their position and their unique context does really well in our city. So what we can do is share that kind of extent of ambition with you all, and then Isabel's going to pick up the rest of the question.
So we are really proud of our outcomes for disadvantaged children, because we're above we were above national last year, and we continue to expect to be above the kind of national data moving forward. So we're really pleased, and it's down to the hard work and commitment of children, families and schools. So I just want to celebrate that, because this, it's not easy, is it? So what we've done is we've agreed with the multi-academy trust CEOs that we met recently that we would have an education strategy. So that work has started now, and the plan is to make sure that through that work we really recognise and are ambitious for all children, so that no child gets left behind. So we want to really continue to build on the momentum and the strength of that partnership, and to make sure that we just continue up and up and up, because we know that our children can do it in Plymouth. Thank you. Oh, and I forgot to say who I was. I'm Isabel Kalinsky. I'm the Head of Education and Virtual School.
Councillor Criswell.
Just to add a bit more, really, I think everything's been said, but what's really important, and I think I said that in my introduction, is that we are ambitious for everyone and for all. And we certainly, yes, we see some improving results, but we don't want to be complacent in any way whatsoever, and want to make sure that we give you all the best support we possibly can in order to make sure that everyone achieves and is able to do their absolute and achieve their best.
Thank you for that, guys.
And the next question relates to page 9, and is Lily is asking this question.
Thank you, Stuart. So we can see that the mainstream English and Maths GCSE grade is 4 and above, which is 66%. Disadvantaged is 58%, and children in care is 8%, which we think means there is a 1 in 12 chance of children in care reaching this level. What is being done to improve this, and what will be in place to give me the best chance of success by the time I do my GCSEs? Do you think the top tips for schools from care experienced young people reproduce can help with these improvements?
I'll just start by mentioning seeing the top tips that you've got there, which I think are excellent again, and certainly something that I think we need to be making sure that we actually take increasingly on board, and also are shared. I don't know how widely these are in fact shared, but shared, obviously they're quite key in terms of sharing with our schools and our multi-academy trusts, and I think it's a really good, it's some really good useful pointers and help to us as well. So I'm really very much appreciating some of the questions and some of the suggestions. You know, you're not just coming up with challenges, but also I think with answers as well.
Thank you. It is a great question, and one an ambition we share for all of our children, because they are our children after all. So every child in care has a personal education plan, and so the delivery of that is overseen by our virtual school, and you've met Isabel, who's the head of virtual school. So like Councillor Cresswell, I absolutely agree that these top tips should be front and centre, and sharing with all our school leaders, but school leaders also outside of the city where some of our children live as well. So it's not only a case of working really hard in the city, as we've described, and making sure we do ever better for our children and their personal and unique circumstances, but also working with every person who educates our children. So I hope that gives you real confidence that our virtual school will really take the top tips forward and make sure they're embedded right across, but also really drive that ever improvement in those foundational subjects, because it's absolutely key, isn't it? So we will absolutely do that and make it a real priority of the virtual school. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. That helps a lot.
Just for information, I do know it was shared at the Senko conference, and I think it was also shared in the head teacher's briefing as well, but I think the drive would be good as well.
I'm going to take that straight away as an action to make sure that we are really promoting it across all of our schools with all of the senior leaders. Thank you.
And the final question from us comes from Robin, and is again a general one and links to Robin's campaign.
Thank you, Stuart. So my campaign, which is one of the priorities for young people, is around cost of living crisis and the impact on education opportunity. Can you tell us how secondary schools supporting students struggling to afford equipment like just uniform and stationery? How are schools supporting students struggling to access online resources and homework? How do you ensure all schools are supporting this? This is also for colleges and sixth forms.
That's, again, a really, really good question. And certainly I go into schools and I see some of the work that's being done to support some of our young people. But I don't know that we necessarily have an overall set of data that actually actually gives that information for all of our schools in the city. And it might be quite a challenging task, but I think it could actually be something that would be really useful from the point of view of having an overall understanding of where support is going through and what sort of support is going through from different schools to support young people and their families with the cost of living. But also the other advantage of it would be that you'd be able to see some good practice that's going on in schools, and good practice which schools would probably be very keen and eager to share with other schools. So as far as I'm concerned, that would seem to be an action point if we don't already have something like that in place.
So thank you, Robin, for the question, and it's very pertinent. And there are, families and children and young people that are experiencing the cost of living crisis in Plymouth. I think in follow-up to Councillor Cresswell's endorsement, really, of your question and the need to find out more, we could do a survey amongst our schools, and I'm sure our head teachers and senior leaders, like Mr. Williams behind you, would be prepared to help in that. So we could actually just get a collection of those things that schools are doing. I know from visiting schools and being a head teacher myself that schools do lots of things to help children and families, from helping with uniforms, paying for equipment, helping with the cost of school trips and visits, etc. But it would be a great idea to have that collected from across the council, and then we would know if we've got any gaps in provision, and then we could help to identify how we how we might meet any of those needs or any of those gaps. So are you happy for us to take that action on your behalf and report it back to you?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Perhaps you could help us design it. How about that? Would you help us design the way we ask the schools for that information? I'm thinking we might do something at the next head teacher conference and have something on the tables for head teachers to write there and then and leave with us, and we can collate. But would you help us with that?
Yes, I'd love to do that. Especially along with me with Youth Parliament, I'm sure lots of our cabinet members would love to help with that, as I'm not the only person who's come up with this sort of idea in the past.
Thank you. We'll work with you on that. Thanks.
And both Robin and Sienna are coming to next head teachers conference as well to talk about their campaigns anyway. So.
Right.
That's an excellent set of questions. Thank you very much for that. I now hand over to councillors to see if there are any further questions that haven't been covered by those five. Councillor McClay first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wondered if, first of all, there might be a bit of a recommendation to move based on what the young people have fed back to us regarding the inaccessibility of some of these reports. I've been on this panel, I think, for several years now, and I'm still in acronym mode when I'm reading these, and they do just take quite a while. I think we're really good at breaking them down in the scorecard report, but I think a glossary appending each of these reports might be really useful and help, honestly, all of us access these reports.
Thank you, that's a really good suggestion. And I've added it to the list of recommendations I think we've made on this item, but we'll come back to at the end. Any other questions from councillors? Councillor McClay again.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question in regards to page 9, which looks at the cohort of children in care. It's not so much of a question as a need for clarification. So looking at it, there's a stat here that says 38%, I think, of asylum-seeking children had homes and schools outside of the Plymouth local authority area. I'm wondering if you could tell me, are they part of our statistics because we have a responsibility for them? And also, why is that number so high?
Yes, they are our children and therefore part of our statistics. So as corporate parents, absolutely. And so many out of our system can be many reasons. My colleague Lisa might want to help answer that. But so we have, as you know, a duty to welcome our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, and we do. Sometimes there aren't homes available, sadly, in the city, and sometimes they come in a rushed way. So, and unfortunately, many of our children for whom we have that duty for end up outside of the city. So we're doing lots to grow provision in the city to keep them close to home. And sometimes it's also a question of connections with other factors that may support them in their daily life by living further away. But our intention is always to bring them as close as possible when it's safe to do so.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you. It's actually very much related to Councillor McClay, hence why I'll follow it up now. When you say that the individual children are not within our local authority area, how far away are they then potentially moved to? Is it in Devon and Cornwall, or is it as far away as Birmingham or further away, depending on how these movements take place? And whilst we've only reported the percentages, do you actually have the numbers of children that you could tell us, please?
Hello, Lisa Davies, Service Director for Children and Families. So, of course, it would always be our priority to keep children in their local area with the people and places and spaces that they're familiar with. But there is additional pressure on our available placements of where we can find homes for children. And unfortunately, some of those are outside of the Plymouth area and they can be across the UK. Of course, we will try to keep them as near to their home base as possible, but that isn't always possible, unfortunately.
So roughly then, how many are not in, say, Devon and Cornwall, but further away, and what are the actual numbers? We have a percentage, but I'd like the actual number if we have it to hand, please.
Is that just for UASC? For unaccompanied children? You're asking? 25.
I mean, I can add to that if it's helpful. Many of the children do have to, as Lisa has said, have their homes outside of Plymouth. We do have a number of foster carers that provide homes for our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, and they thrive in our Plymouth foster care homes. But a good number of the children do have to have a placement outside of Devon and Cornwall. A number of those children at the moment are placed in London, actually, and again are thriving well in foster care placements, or in some cases residential placements in London. So we can get you more granular level detail and circulate that to the committee if that's helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Kresenak.
Reading this report, I'm a little bit puzzled that all the indications are indicated in percentages. And working with percentages can quite distort the reality of the situation. So if we talk about 50% of 2, then it's only 1 person. But if we talk about 50% of 1,000, we are talking about 500. So in this report, I am not clear and do not understand what kind of issues we as a council have and how many individuals are affected. Because for me, it's more important to know how many individuals we have so we can have a proper action plan than the percentages as such. Thank you.
Councillor Creswell, you wanted to come back and I missed you. Do you want to say something?
And actually it relates to both those questions, because I think that it is actually quite valid to say about actual numbers, especially when you're dealing with small numbers. In fact, in the report itself, when it talks about being able to work out look at the numbers for A-level in comparison with GCSE, one of the things it raises is that once you go into A-level, you've got smaller numbers, and when you have smaller numbers, it's always much more difficult to just by simply having percentages. They can become, as you've just said, Councillor, they can become really quite distorted. So I think that is quite valid, especially when we're looking at smaller numbers. And I think in the past we have had a discussion before about actually including for some of our data as making sure that we do have numbers in there as well as percentages.
Councillor Noble.
Sometimes as a governor they produce lots of data for the school. Some of it seems to be very granularised. I think there's a couple of children in some of the categories. But is there often that's compared to national figures? Do we have a Plymouth figures for those types of categories? Or does it not?
So wherever possible, we will provide that granularity, but there's also a question, obviously, of children's identity. So sometimes if it's, we might say fewer than 5, so that we can't, we're not revealing children's identities. So just coming back to that numbers point, but I think the numbers question is valid. In terms of that granular level detail and comparisons, we do our utmost to compare to statistical neighbours, so local authorities who are just like us, who have similar conditions, and we do our very best to compare to national, so we're constantly benchmarking ourselves, and we've tried to put some of that in the report. When the report is validated, so when we, all of these results are valid, and we have, kind of sign off, if you like, we will sort of provide some of that comparison data, because obviously we want to know how our children are doing. And as we've shown, our children who are disadvantaged are doing better than most in the nation. So things like that we do want to celebrate and learn where we could do even better.
So are you able to trace, obviously, you would have tried different projects or policies in the past. So where there are those differences where we're perhaps better than the national, are those things we can explain, the particular, maybe there's a particular strategy or focus on a particular subject, perhaps,
So where we see great practice in the city, we've made a real commitment, and Mr. Williams, who's on the screen, or Robert, as I know him, we've talked about this a lot, how we celebrate with the whole education community, finding very, very best practice and then growing it across the city. And we think that's really, really important. So whenever we find a strategy that's working, as you say, for a subject or for a cohort of children, naturally we'll want to do the best for that and try and ensure the whole education community picks up on that best practice.
Thank you very much. Any further questions from councillors before I call back Councillor Cresswell? Councillor Cresswell?
I was just sort of like following up on that. So an example would have been if you look at, I don't remember which page, but if you look at the phonics screening check data, one of the things that some of the positives, this was some positive results there, and one of the things that's quite interesting there is the Plymouth Oracy project, which was rolled out across the city, had a real impact, and looking at that, looking at the positive data there, probably relates to the fact that previously that sort of strong work was done and has therefore had an impact. And schools will all the time, and within their multi-academy trust, will be looking at and tracking that some schools have even if they might be in areas of disadvantage, might be having a particularly good, particularly good performance and such, and looking and sort of delving into the sort of granular detail about certain groups will be doing particularly well. And therefore, the thing that teachers and educators then do is share that information so that you can actually pass on best practice and support other schools and other cohorts of children.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Krizanak?
Looking at the early outcomes in a sense of provision of education and uptake and the care of the children in the system, do we have any idea what is the parity between academy settings to comparison to state schools?
Yes, we look at across the system, so we can break down some of the results by Academy Trust, by and working with the CEOs of the MATs is something we're getting better and better at sharing those comparisons, so we can really understand, as I say, best practice. So yes, we do that very proactively. When it comes to outcomes, we do wait for validation for obvious reasons, but it doesn't mean we stop. We pause the conversation, we have them now, and we do all those comparisons.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much. It comes to the recommendation section. I'll come to you, Jake, in a second. What I've noted down is that we need a young people-friendly report that's circulated beyond, and the wording for that would be hopefully written down by Jake. The sharing of the top tips for schools from care experienced young people needs to be shared more widely, and I heard a commitment to that. And I think it was shared to councillors on the committee, but can we make sure that it is again, please? A survey of schools, we heard a commitment from David that will be done, and he has said that he will work with Robin and Sienna and others to ask head teachers to identify what is being done by schools to address those issues, like the cost of uniforms, trips and equipment and other things that are impacted by the cost of living crisis. And then a plea again for a glossary. What I heard was a glossary for each report, which I think is sometimes we'll be repeating the same things, but I think it's essential that people who are not from an education background understand the terminology those of us use frequently without realising people don't understand. Jake, were there any other recommendations that I've missed?
I had granular level data on children placed outside of the city and a briefing report sent around to the members of the committee. Excellent.
So we need to also note the report formally.
So could I confirm that briefing note will be focused on unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, as requested by Councillor Wood?
Councillors happy to note the report and go with those recommendations? Can I see a show of hands just to confirm that, please? Thank you very much. Okay, it's at this point I'll say thank you to Chesney, Dylan, Lily, Robin and Sienna. Thank you ever so much for your time and input this evening. It's been very valuable once again. Thank you. So we're moving to item 6, and Rob, you've been headlined several times in the last few minutes. It's time to shine. I will hand over to Councillor Creswell to introduce this item, which is a belonging framework for Plymouth and the place-based plan. It would be good to hand over to Sally Creswell, but I can't currently. She's done a runner. Rob, would you like to introduce yourself while we're waiting for normality to return?
Yeah, of course, it'd be my pleasure. So good evening, everyone. For those that don't know me, I'm Rob Williams. So I'm a Director of Education for a multi-academy trust, but I also lead on behalf of the city the Plymouth Place-Based Plan. So I've spent the majority of my life in Plymouth. I was born here. I was a head teacher here. I went to university here. So the work in Plymouth is very, very close to my heart, something I feel really passionate about, and it is a genuine and absolute honour to get to lead this on behalf of the city. So nice to meet you all by virtually.
Thank you very much. And Hannah, I wonder if we could ask you to introduce yourself too, because you're key to lots of things happening for our Scrutiny Committee too. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Hannah Pugliese. I'm the Director of Women and Children's Services at NHS Devon Integrated Care Board.
And we are joined by Sally Creswell again. So Councillor Creswell, I'm formally handing over to you at this point.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you did some good introductions there, because I was actually out of the room speaking to our young people. This belonging paper, which I'm going to start off by saying belonging, I think, sits at the heart of so much, and I think it's belonging is actually for all of us. This is obviously about our young people in our schools, and about their belonging in school, but belonging in your community, belonging in wider society is actually important for each and every one of us, and is important to each and every one of us who just sit around this table. So thank you to Rob for that the introduction. But the belonging framework puts belonging at the heart of school improvement. When children feel safe, recognised and valued, they're more likely to attend, to engage and succeed. Isn't that true of all of us? This framework offers practical strategies across 8 areas, from leadership to curriculum and transitions, helping schools build inclusive cultures tailored to their communities. The place-based plan goes deeper. It's tackling the root causes of poor attendance. It's not just about the numbers. It's about trust. It's about connection. It's about those connected relationships which are so key to a school community and to opportunity. With 6 evidence-informed priorities and tools like the predictive risk model and resilience enablement framework, we're shifting from a reactive to proactive support. We're building resilience around children and families before problems arise. Basically, we're talking here, as we talk in many things, about early intervention, because we know that if attendance drops, then it's actually hard to get it back. You need to intervene before it's either happened or even is likely to happen. And we know that it's working because last year Plymouth's attendance rose by 0.8%, while nationally it fell by 0.3%. So we are closing the gap. Outcomes are improving, especially for our disadvantaged learners, and permanent exclusions are down. Plymouth is leading the way, and we're proud to be working with the DfE to pilot the National Attendance Campaign. Our collective focus is clear. We want to reduce absence, we want to strengthen belonging, we want to tackle persistent challenges like elective home education and rates of attendance and exclusion, making sure we don't leave our vulnerable and disadvantaged learners behind. And I just want to share a quote. It's not my quote. It's something that came out of when I attended Kate Kearns, who did the conference for our designated teachers, and came out with this wonderful quote that was used there about sense of belonging. And it says, diversity means you're invited to the dance. Inclusion means you're asked to dance. But belonging, well, that's dancing like no one is watching you. So I leave you with that thought.
That's a great quote. Rob, is there anything you wish to say before we open it up to councillors' questions? You're on mute.
No, I don't think I could have done a better introduction than what Councillor Cresswell had done. So I am happy for people to ask questions, and we'll have a discussion.
Excellent. Councillor Krasnak?
I wholeheartedly welcome this programme, and one of the words that really struck me, which says, every child matters here. And I think what a beautiful way to show that the leaders in our schools, teachers, assistants, and the rest of the staff are taking that responsibility upon themselves to make every child count. And this just sums it up in my mind. I'm really pleased and overjoyed to read this report, because it puts quite a lot of different colorful pebbles, as I would say, in a ball, with the people from different backgrounds, people from different upbringings, different home structures, and every child has the equal opportunity to prosper, to grow, to feel valued, and be able then to move in their lives in a positive direction. I have just one question, and that is, some of the children that want to go to a specific school, they cannot go to. And that is very disheartening. What can we do to eradicate that?
I mean, I think ultimately, I mean, I completely agree. I think, people will always have a preference for schools. I mean, the overwhelming majority of parents do get their first choice school for their child. But I think ultimately what we want to be in a position is that every single school that we have in our city is absolutely wonderful, is absolutely fantastic, and that every child would be really happy to get to. I think the practicalities are schools have a certain size, they will have a certain planned admission number, And when those planned admission numbers are full, it's very difficult then to offer additional spaces into that school because of things such as number of classrooms, the capacity of classrooms, the numbers of staff that to make sure that the pupil adult ratios are appropriate. So it is it's definitely a challenge. And ultimately, we would want every child to go to their first choice school. Isabel and Amanda may have some stats on. I don't know what the percentage was the last year that got their first choice. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, and it is very high, and happy to provide them after because we do have those stats, but I just don't have them in my memory. But it is very high.
Excellent. Councillor Macleay?
Thank you, Chair. There is lots of lovely stuff in this report, and I think, as Councillor Cresswell really brilliantly summed up at the start, it's really important that we get belonging right. It sets people up for a real lifetime of success. What I'm conscious of is how do we measure the success of this report, because it's so important that we get it right. So do we have a starting benchmark and somewhere that we'd like to be in a set number of years? I'm also curious. Basically, there's that kind of like targeted support of certain groups. I kind of noticed that disability and gender weren't included in those groups, and I'm wondering why, if there's a kind of future version that does have those included, and yeah.
Yeah. Right. I'll take. There was a few questions there, so I'll try and take them in order. I think sorry. What was your first question?
So first question was how we're benchmarking success.
Yeah, that was it. Sorry. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the thing with belonging is it manifests itself in almost all the metrics we would use to judge and evaluate a school. I mean, for me, one of the primary metrics of belonging is actually attendance, because if children feel a real connection and belonging to their school and they love the school that they attend, then they are more likely to be there more frequently. I think what we are certainly seeing across the country, not just in Plymouth, is that attendance has not recovered to the levels that it was pre-pandemic. Although Plymouth is bucking the trend a bit there, because nationally it's declined over the last 12 months. That to me is a real challenge. I think outcomes are also a measure of belonging. I think there's emerging research now which shows that the schools that show the highest metrics around belonging are also the schools which achieve highest in terms of pupil outcomes. I think it also relates to things such as suspensions and exclusions. I think it relates to elective home education. So I think there are a lot of metrics out there that we could use. What we are trying to do is we're exploring a piece of work with two research bodies. One is called Impact Ed and the other one is called the Engagement Platform. And they recently published a significant study which shows the level of engagement of young people as they move through their journey in school. And what we see statistically is a drop off. It begins to decline from year 4 and begins to pick up a bit of pace in year 6. Now, I'm not saying this is connected to SATs preparation or not. I wouldn't go so far as to say that, but we start to see that. But when the children transfer into secondary, engagement levels drop hugely. So year 7 in this research shows a almost cliff-like fall off in engagement, and that continues into year 8 and year 9, plateaus in year 10. There's a slight uptick in year 11, possibly related to next steps, GCSE examinations, and so on. So I'm working with that with those organisations to see if we can establish a project in Plymouth where we can get, first of all, baseline data, so we know what our children currently feel like in terms of belonging. And this is more than just the metrics that we've discussed here. This is actual simple things like, what they are enjoying, whether they feel safe, whether they feel listened to, whether they feel valued. So, there's a lot of metrics there that we can use. And then if we work with those over time, we can benchmark this across the city at key points, several times over the course of a year, yearly, and actually build up a profile of data over time to see whether what we're doing around increasing a sense of belonging is actually having impact. Because I think we can use the sort of headline metrics of attendance and outcomes and so on, but I do think when it comes, belonging is a very personal thing, and what makes someone feel like they belong in one set of circumstances might be quite different to someone else. So we need a way of being able to get some sort of metrics that really get under the skin and are perhaps more useful to schools, so they know what to tweak and what to lean in on and what to focus on. Okay, and your second question was about other groups of young people. Yeah, the belonging framework that you've got there, this is in effect a first draft. So it has come out of a number of things. We did a citywide belonging survey with young people and with staff. We had undertaken some research in conjunction with Marjons around attendance, and interestingly, quite a lot of the information that came out of that tied in very closely to belonging. I actually went along to Youth Parliament and spent an evening with them talking about belonging, and they sort of provided live feedback on their views on belonging in schools, and also did a real meta-analysis of quite extensive national research on this. So the belonging framework very much came out of that. Our next step is we are launching it later this month to head teachers. And over the course of this year, we are going to be adding to it. We're going to be building up case studies. The reason why not every single group is covered in there, it's not because they are not important, if that makes sense. It's that statistically, certain groups of young people in the national data sets and research show significantly lower sense of belonging. So we've deliberately targeted those, and you'll notice towards the end there is a section there specifically on white working class British, which I was at a DFE conference yesterday, and the data that was shown up there was really stark. They are now the single most underperforming group in any metric that you use in education in this country today. There is no other group that is experiencing education like they are, and it has to be for us in Plymouth, particularly when you look at our disadvantaged cohorts. So in this case, we're talking about people that might have been eligible for free school meals over the last 6 years. Nationally, 4 out of 5 of pupils eligible for free school meals are white working class British. That figure will probably be higher in Plymouth. So what we're talking about here is the children that are repeatedly being suspended, that are most likely to be electively home educated, that are most likely to have the poorest attendance and are most likely to be underachieving in our city. They are likely to be our white working class British children. So that's the reason why we've chosen certain groups initially, but it will evolve over the course of this year.
Do you want to come back on that?
If that's okay, thank you. Thank you for all that extra context, Rob. That was incredibly useful. I wonder then if the recommendation following that is to include some of that context that Rob has said, what we're hoping to achieve, what those outcomes might be, and also just that little bit of context setting that you really articulately put about why some of those groups have been given priority over others, which I think is right to do.
Thank you. Before I come back to a number of people who've indicated that they also wish to ask a question, can I just ask in terms of clarification, Rob, you talked about engagement. Does that include participation? I'm thinking from a secondary perspective in terms of extracurricular activities, which may not produce exam results, but actually be an important part of showing a young person's sense of belonging to a school and to their educational journey.
100%. It is. I mean, when we use the term engagement here, we are talking about engaging in the full spectrum of school life. So that includes extracurricular and all sorts of enrichment activities as well.
Thank you. Councillor Creswell, you wanted to come back?
I was just going to say, Rob, that some of that, reading the surveys that you did of both primary and also of secondary, some of that is quite useful, I would have thought, as sort of like a baseline, as well as being able to look at it in terms of, you know, it might be have more of a narrative to it, but would certainly show progress and such. And I think when you start to read, and it's really interesting to read children's and young people's views and perspective and such, because you see how important things like, as well as those extracurricular things are, how important things are like friendships and like the simple things, for example, of when you come into school in the morning, you get greeted by your name and such, which is something that's regularly done in primary school, but doesn't always transfer because there's other pressures on and such when you go into secondary school. So I think the sharing of perhaps some of that survey data and also doing a follow-up survey would be actually quite useful in terms of some of those key metrics of progress.
Yeah, I agree.
Councillor Steele?
Thanks for that, Rob. I'm just interested on page 62, where it talks about the predictive risk model and the fact that you're looking at co-developing a digital version for future automation.
Yes.
In terms of the actual, it'd be interesting just to hear a bit of an overview of how does the predictive risk model, how is it actually implemented currently?
Yeah.
Who owns it? What's the data? And kind of what's that ambition in terms of that digital version and future automation? Are you looking to kind of roll it out really broadly across the whole school cohort, or is it only going to be targeted? I'm just interested to hear more about that.
Yeah. So we are currently trialing this in a number of schools because this approach has nobody has looked at attendance in this way before. So what we've done that is unique nationally is we have taken things called compounding factors. These are factors and influences in a young person's life and school experience, which we know when that is statistically backed against outcomes, it shows that there is a significant link, but no one has taken that and applied it to attendance. So what we've developed is we look at things such as your attendance at the end of Key Stage 1. So we are some way away from when those young people get to year 11 and they're taking GCSEs. But what the data shows us is that if your attendance is at 89% or less at the end of Key Stage 1, you are statistically highly likely at some point in secondary to become a persistent absentee in school, even if your attendance during primary recovers. We look at your Key Stage 1 outcomes. So whether you met the phonics screening standard to the right thing. We look at Key Stage 2 attendance. We look at your Key Stage 2 outcomes. We look at the home that you are in. So there is a metric system called the Edaki home bands, which basically look at the composition of households in a community. From least deprived through to most deprived, and you can actually pinpoint down to the individual child where their postcode sits within that. So it won't surprise you that the people that live in the most deprived communities are the ones that statistically are most likely to become persistently absent. So we've got a whole array of sort of 10 metrics that we're using, and we've attached a statistical weighting as to the impact that those things have. And then what our schools can now do, particularly at their transition cohorts, they can enter the data for the young people, and it will generate in effect a risk level for that young person. And what that risk level is telling you that in the future, there is a strong chance that this young person may be at risk of becoming a persistent absentee. So schools can, in effect, before we have any warning signs or concerns or any sort of decline in attendance, we know who are the children in 18 months, 2 years that we may need to do reactive work with. But if we know in advance, we start doing things proactively. And then the framework which supports that flips some of the research on its head, because lots of the research in schools seems to suggest that it's the academic interventions that have the greatest impact. But all the research around it suggests that those children are in school and they have strong sense of belonging and they have secure attendance. But actually, the most important thing for those higher risk young people is all about things like connecting with the family, building relationships with the family, ensuring that the well-being of the child is absolutely secure. And it's only when you've built up that strong, resilient foundation for the young person that you can then start to move to the academic interventions. So the goal here really is, at those key transition points, we know about the young people that might have for example, education healthcare plans, and they will be subject to an enhanced transition and additional support. We will also have some children that are flagged by primary schools of, actually, we've got a few concerns here and these children need a little bit of extra support. But what this impact ed and engagement platform data that I was referring to just a minute ago, what it shows is there must be a hidden group of young people that are not flagged at the point of primary transition, who over the course of year 7 and into year 8, their engagement levels drop off and attendance really starts to decline. So what we want to be able to do is say, who are those children going to be? And rather than us reacting to an issue which is manifested, we get in there in advance and we proactively work with the family, support the young people, and actually prevent them from becoming an attendance decliner in the future. And that for us that is in effect, it's the dream really in education, to be able to get in there early, because again, the data shows from the DFE, and they've got access to huge data sets, once attendance decline begins, it is almost impossible to reverse that attendance decline. So if a child in a school drops to below 90% attendance, the chances of that child ever recovering that attendance in any subsequent year is statistically really small. So therefore, the only thing really we've got at our disposal is we need to intervene while they're on 100% attendance, and we need to keep them there. And we're only going to do that through working with the families, supporting the child, and making sure they feel that actually school is a safe place, a place where they're valued, supported, and they can succeed. And in terms of moving it into a digital format, so at the moment, schools are having to do this manually using a database that I created. We are working with the School Transition Portal, which are the company that we use across Plymouth now. It was one of the place-based pieces of work, which was to standardise the flow of information between primary into secondary. It's a really good programme. And we're working with them to potentially integrate that. So at the point of transition, the children are already flagged to the schools that these are the children that you need to be working with immediately. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ney?
Thank you, Chair. This report is doing great things when children are actually in school to increase inclusion and get them involved. But I wonder whether we should look more at barriers to get into school as well. For example, on page 10 of the report, we've talked about tackling disadvantage and poverty. But then when we go to page 11, in the actions, ideas for action, there's actually nothing there about finding out if there's a poverty barrier for children going to school. Can mum afford the bus fare by the end of the month? Is one of the children, looking after other children while mum's at work, things like that? I think that also needs to be included, because that is a big exclusion barrier in my ward. We don't have a high school in my ward, and people are paying a lot of money to get on the bus to go to high school.
No, I completely agree. And to be honest with you, I should have been probably clearer in my introduction. So please don't read the ideas there as an exhaustive list. It is literally at this stage, because it is a draft framework. because so far this is based on the surveys we've done, the research that's been undertaken, etc. Now it's about how we do this in our schools. So the ideas are purely there for stimulus. And what we will do over the course of this year is actually build up a really clear bank of consistent actions that we can do across the city. So no, I completely agree with you. One of the key barriers to attendance is definitely things such as transport. It is also things, such as housing. And interestingly, that you mentioned that a research paper was published by the DFE in August. It was done through Cambridge University, and it was called The Home Learning Environment and Attainment. And it basically attributed that from the research, 84% of the variation we see in pupil outcomes is down to individual pupil characteristics. So the differences between pupils and their personal circumstances. Only 16% of the variation was down to individual schools and the variation between them. So one of the things we can't do, and I know there is obviously a bit of a debate nationally about, okay, what is the role of schools? Where does that start? Where does that end? But the reality is schools are a reflection of the communities, etc., that they serve, and any of the barriers and challenges that those communities face or the communities that their children live in, schools are inevitably going to have to work with other agencies and other partners, because actually to address this issue, this just cannot be done on its own by schools. We've got to actually involve all other stakeholders and parties in this. So yes, so just to reassure you that the ideas that are there, it is just a few ideas for some stimulus, but actually we will build as a city a really good, deep, comprehensive list of what schools could do. And that will include things such as addressing some of the known barriers we've got to attendance.
Amanda, you want to come in at that point?
Yes, thank you, Rob, and thank you for a great question, and we really welcome that extent of challenge, so thank you so much for that. And since we published this for this committee, Hannah, who's also on screen, Rob, David and I have met to strengthen the systemic approach, because as Rob said, this can't just be about schools. So what's our ICB and health system doing? So things like mental health and schools teams and other approaches in communities, as you say, for the children who aren't in school, needs to be strengthened to give this real weight. So great question, thank you.
Councillor Creswell?
Just going to briefly say that it links in rather well, doesn't it, to one of those questions that one of the young people actually asked about the cost of living. And certainly, being able to perhaps gather together some of the information that we already have that schools are actually doing, and being able to perhaps more widely share that. And again, as I go back to sharing that good practice. So it does tie in rather well with some of those very questions that I think it was that Robin actually raised. Thank you.
Councillor Krizanek?
Rob, I would ask, you mentioned the attendance of the children at school has a certain pattern. Now, going through the list of the things that people might be going absent from the school, we're talking about medical appointments. We talk about people that have certain medical conditions that require them to have treatments in their hospitals, etc. And then we have this group that just can't be bothered to go to school. Now, what you said just a little bit shocked me, because I just felt you have said, use the same brush and they all go under the same umbrella. And I don't believe that the children that are physically ill and need the medical treatment are the ones that will be absent because that is what they want to do. Because of the circumstances that they find themselves in, that is why they're absent. And I think probably in the definition of attendance or absenteeism, we should use probably constructive approach in those that need that medical assistance that will be absent from the school because of it are not being treated or labeled as in the same way as those that deliberately don't want to attend the school. The second thing that I have noticed is that within the school environment, especially within the academy trusts, that certain individuals or certain teachers cover several schools, so the children within the schools do not have a consistency of a same teacher teaching them. And I think that is probably one of the areas that you as a person within the trust can address, because if a child feels unsettled and they have like autism, they like a structure. And if that structure is being disrupted, then their behavior will affect the work of the entire class. So there's some of the things and the tweaks that we can do within the environment that we have and provide that stability that the children require in their classes. So can that be addressed at your next meetings and group meetings when you discuss it with your colleagues? Thank you.
No, yeah, no. Thank you for your questions. There, yeah, I'll just clarify on the absence slash attendance bit. Just to reassure you, it is always far more nuanced than perhaps the discussion we're just having here this evening, where we're talking generally about persistent absenteeism. There are always going to be young people due to medical conditions and completely genuine reasons why attendance may not be at the level that that we would perhaps aspire to. That's absolutely fine. We would always work with families. We want children to be supported the best that they can. But certainly what we have seen across the country is that the sheer number of young people today that are not currently in school on any given day. So I think, approximately in secondary across the country, about 1 in 10 secondary age children across the country are currently not in school every single day, which is, I think, a really high number. And if those young people aren't in school, we can't always guarantee that people have eyes on them. We can't guarantee that they are safeguarded. It's having an impact on their education, gaps in learning, and potentially has, a negative impact on their future. So, ultimately, we want more children in school more of the time. However, fully recognise there will be young people out there where there are genuine medical appointments, there's genuine illness. Okay, there may be reasons why a child repeatedly has to be off school. But this is also something where we can work with other partners. So, for example, there are some cases around the country where certain local authorities have worked with the NHS and have tried to get an agreement with GPs around for school age children wherever possible. It's not always going to be possible, but wherever possible, not offering appointments during school hours, that actually priority is given for outside of school hours, so medical appointments can still be attended without actually impacting on what happens during the school. So there are always, potential things that can be discussed and considered. So yeah, so just to reassure you on the medical side there. And the second one, I think I speak for all schools in the city that we would be in complete agreement with you. The best thing for young people is to have a great teacher in front of them for every single lesson, and we would want that teacher to be consistent for those young people. Unfortunately, we do operate in a world where recruitment is a challenge at times, and sometimes it is difficult to get the right subject specialist in front of a young person, and sometimes schools have to be a bit more creative to get specialists in front of young people. You also have issues with just like with any form of work, that you might have people that are off sick themselves, you may have people that are on long-term absence, and sometimes being able to backfill, particularly roles on a sort of temporary or interim basis, is also really difficult. But yeah, I just want to reassure you, 100%, every school in our city would be completely committed to that. It is just sometimes we are presented with difficult circumstances, and we are just trying to get the best possible person we can in front of our children.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wood.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On page 46, you've highlighted the want to represent different cultures and displays and the curriculum content of school events and acknowledge and celebrate cultural or religious observances. Now, this is a predominantly Christian country and traditionally British city, so what if parents would prefer that their children were aware of other religious festivals and observances, but wouldn't perhaps want their children to celebrate them? On page 49, you note potentially having cultural celebrations and shared meals, which would then raise the question of perhaps halal food being served. Now, what if parents didn't want their children eating a different religiously blessed or non-stunned food? It's got to be treated very carefully because, of course, some parents would object and others absolutely wouldn't. So how do you tread that boundary? And indeed, when it comes to page 47, under supporting LGBTQ+ pupils, you note uniform choices, but what if some or a majority of parents wish to retain gendered uniforms? Or what if, when you've highlighted suggesting placing rainbow stickers on doors or holding Pride Month events, what if parents would prefer that these symbols or observances were kept out of a classroom or perhaps retained for secondary school or college? How do you approach this in a measured way to suit all of the parents that are having their children going to all our schools across the city?
Because what appears in that document, I think, as it says on the first page, that what appears in there, these are ideas, these are potential suggestions, they have come from recommendations from national research and so on, examples of things that have worked. But it will not suit every single school, it will not suit every single community. I believe in trusting our head teachers. I believe that head teachers know their schools well, they know their communities well, they know what will and what will not work within those communities. Part of building a sense of belonging, it's not just about building a sense of belonging with the children, it is also about building a sense of belonging with the family. So it is knowing your families, it is knowing your community, and it is reflecting the needs and the wants of the community that you serve. So it is certainly not an instruction that any one school should do any one particular thing. It is just being mindful that obviously within any school community, you will have a diverse range of young people. And one of the key things around building a sense of belonging is it's the sense that you are noticed, it's the sense you are included, and it's the sense of being respected for who you are. Now, how that looks in any one school, I would never seek to dictate as to what that would look like. I think that remains a decision for head teachers in consultation with their parents, with their student body, with their staff, and it has to reflect the uniqueness of their local community. I do think it is important on a personal note that even if you are in a particular community, which may not have the diversity of some other areas around the country, that I still think it is important that people are aware of what our country is like and different people in our country, and having, part of British values is having respect and tolerance for other people, for other cultures and other beliefs. But how individual schools do that, we would not be seeking to push any particular strategy. and that will always be the responsibility of the head teacher, always. It would never be something we would be collectively pushing. And as I said, these are simply ideas that have come out of national research. It may be appropriate in school A, it may not be appropriate in school B.
Councillor McNamara.
Thank you, Chair. This is a good report, lots of interesting things, especially the ideas about transitions. I was particularly interested in the stuff about white working class pupils as a white working class person myself. And you say that they're disadvantaged because of industrial decline and we're rural and coastal, but that affects ethnic people, diverse people who live here. Do you not think that maybe schools are sort of not attuned to traditional working class beliefs and views, that they're too liberal and diverse? Maybe you just mentioned all that stuff that Councillor Wood was going on about. Do you think maybe we're getting, or working class white people are getting pushed out by a middle class education system? And also, is it worse for working class white boys than girls? Thank you.
I mean, first of all, I would say I think it is not fully understood nationally. It's one of the reasons why the Department for Education have launched a significant investigation, if you like, into this. They've appointed a whole committee around this. They've started doing some initial research into it, which they were presenting yesterday. It wasn't so much talking about the reasons why specifically white working class British are underperforming in a way, you know, in comparison to other groups of young people, but it was laying it out really stark, that it was really clear that they were, and whatever is happening currently, both outside our schools and within our schools, it appears to be having a detrimental impact on the future success of those young people. So I can't sit here right now and give you a load of answers as to why that is, because this has existed in our country for generations in schools, since we've actually been measuring data. I'd say probably in the last 20 years, where we've actually got some rich data sets. This problem has persisted across all schools in all regions of the country. It has barely changed. People are trying things, but seem to be having limited success. In fact, a quite stark statistic is, I think there are about 1,228 secondary schools in the country with statistically significant populations of white working class British. And of that 1,228, there are only 21 schools that achieved a progress score of over 0. So what that meant is that in about 1,200 odd schools, those white working class British children were performing far less well than their peers, and there's only 21 schools that have been able to do that. So there's a lot of work still to do. It does appear to be locality as a factor. So certainly areas with the highest levels of deprivation seem to have the biggest challenges. There appears to be some sort of early connection between this concept of the fracturing of the social contract, this idea of in the past that perhaps there was a belief that hard work, qualifications, etc. would pay off, that you would own a house, etc. That is perhaps less likely for a lot of a lot of people today. There's pressure on services. There is a general lack of trust in public institutions. We're seeing sort of increased division and polarization in society. And there is obviously certain things going on within schools across the country that could be related to structures, it could be curriculum offer, it could be policies, it could be related to behaviour management. There's a lot of complex factors at play here, and I would say at the moment it is not fully clear as to what all those reasons are. But as I said, there is a national commitment. I know that the government have said that this is a national priority for the Department for Education. They have set up a commission. They've got an extensive group of people that are looking into this, undertaking the research, and they hope to have published all of their findings with their recommendations for schools in 2026. I'm sorry, I know you had a second question. Can you just remind me what it was?
Yeah, it was whether white boys do worse than the white working class girls.
Yeah, interestingly, very little difference between white working class boys and girls. The boys do slightly less well than the girls, but statistically, very little difference, which surprised the researchers actually that have just undertaken this research. It was one of the surprise bits of information that was shared at the conference yesterday. Yeah, very little difference between boys and girls.
Thank you. Councillor Noble?
The belonging framework, obviously the head teacher would try and, I suppose it would start with the strengths of their school if they took it over, and then sort of try and conjure up the environment, through, they might want to pull things in particular directions and what have you. And so I understand this is creating the environment that you'd want maybe the school leader or of the environment, and then on the second part of it, you've got these KPIs, and it mentions several times about a belonging score.
Yes.
And it says on one of these KPIs, it says increase in pupils reporting a strong sense of belonging using a TEP survey. But just what is this belonging score? Is the other things, all these other KPIs that we want, like better attendance or there's all sorts here, reduction in PA and EHE, I don't know what that means, but anyway, but those type of things that you can measure,
yeah.
Or is it about trying to get the belonging? Because I thought I envisaged the belonging as more of a feeling and a it's more intangible, whereas we want to increase belonging, but we want the tangible outcomes. Sorry, that's a question there.
Yeah. No. I do understand your question.
What's the outcomes of that? What are the outcomes that are the important things? What are the outcomes what outcomes will you know? Is it these KPIs, or is it some kind of score that you derive from a survey? What's the outcomes of it?
Yeah, I mean, in reality, it is a combination of all of those things. So we have our hard metrics, which are what I would call rates of attendance, reduction in elective home education, which is what the EHE means, reduction in persistent absence, which is what the PA means. Improving outcomes such as the proportion of children achieving a grade 5+ in both English and maths, etc. But alongside that, the belonging score refers to the work with Impact Ed and TEP, means the engagement platform, which are the two bodies that undertook the research into engagement, and they have developed a survey which looks at things such as whether the children feel valued, whether they feel listened to, whether they love coming to school, and then they actually create a belonging score from that data set. So we can not only measure the hard outcomes, which I think are a reflection of a sense of belonging in school, but it also enables us to get some extra additional rich information about actually how children feel. because ultimately we want children to love coming to school. We want children to be happy at school. Attendance is a measure of that, but I don't think gives us sufficient information. So actually what this will enable us to do is to balance the hard metrics against those soft, more granular bits of information, which schools can then use to plan what their next steps might be, which areas they might need to improve. And actually, importantly for us in the city, is to actually celebrate the things which are going really well. So when we can see these data sets, because we will get them more frequently than annual outcome data, it means that we can see, okay, why has there been a sudden rise in sense of belonging in this school? And then we can go and see, what is it that you've done? Okay, what can we now learn? What can we share with other schools in the city? And that's really the essence of a sort of place-based approach, is about we have got citywide issues that we're trying to address, and we have the whole city working on them. And then as we learn things, we share and permeate that information from one school into other schools.
Thank you very much, Rob. That's a comprehensive answer. Councillor Steele, I'm going to make this the last question on this item.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in your perspective, Rob, on the linkages between supporting LGBT plus pupils and their mental health. That comes on straight after, in terms of the difference in belonging for those LGBT plus students and the impact on their mental health. I speak as somebody who probably there's a number of people around this table who feel the same way. When I was at school, I hated it. As a gay man growing up, I was in a very homophobic environment, and I lacked any, advocates or any kind of examples of a safe space, frankly. And I would hazard a guess that there's probably not an LGBT plus person pretty much alive who hasn't experienced poor mental health due to that lack of belonging, who hasn't probably contemplated harming themselves, suicide, things like that. And from my perspective, the hurt feelings of a few intolerant people is a price worth paying to protect the well-being of LGBT plus children in Plymouth schools. Wouldn't you agree?
I mean, as I said, I think it is down to individual head teachers within their own communities with their own pupils. I think we live in a rich, diverse country. I think we should celebrate that diversity. I think that diversity brings real strength. I think we do have a duty to our young people to raise awareness of the richness and diversity in our country. I also think it is important for groups of young people, particularly those that we know statistically, and LGBTQ plus pupils we know are statistically more likely to have mental health issues and to find school far more challenging. And we know that building a sense of belonging is feeling seen, feeling valued, and feeling supported. And I think it is important that schools, in whatever way they think is the most appropriate way, that they show that support. Now, in some schools, that will be things such as you may have members of staff that might wear LGBTQ plus badges that simply signify, do you know what? I'm an ally. I'm here. If you want to talk to me, you can come and talk to me. It is okay for you to be who you want to be. You're seen, you're valued, you're heard within the school. And I think it's really important. I would not want any child, whatever their background, whatever their circumstances, to go through any one of our schools in Plymouth and to feel isolated and to feel marginalized and to feel that they don't matter. That's not, to me, that is not okay. Now, what that looks like in individual schools, I think, sits very much with the head teacher who leads that school. But it's really important that we don't overlook any groups of young people. All children should feel safe and connected and successful in the schools that they attend. So I would as I said, I'm not here to advocate any particular strategy or particular intervention. We've provided suggestions and some ideas. We will have further discussion with our schools. We will learn from the best practice that happens in our city, and we will share that best practice. And then ultimately that becomes the decisions for the leaders of those schools, how that looks within their own settings.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question and thank you for the answer. Amanda, I know that you want to come back on this point.
A really short point. There is a legal duty for schools under the Equalities Act to ensure that no people experiences discrimination. So this is a legal matter, which I know Rob's aware of as well.
Thank you very much. So I'm conscious that we had one recommendation articulated by Councillor Macleay right at the very beginning of this item. Councillor Macleay, can I ask you to perhaps phrase that for me? I didn't write it down, apologies. Can you think back that far?
So long ago. Yes, so the recommendation is to include some metrics for measuring our progress in belonging and to include some context about how we measure what belonging is and how we're measuring it. Rob, did that feel like that kind of summed up the discussion that we had?
Yes, it did. It did.
Thank you. I also had one other little request because I spent quite a lot of time looking through the references, reading the material. I think it was really excellent. You can just tell the amount of like hard work and soul and heart that you and everyone else has put into this. I would just love to see those references put in throughout the report so it's a bit easier to jump between the part of the report and then the background material.
Thank you very much. Any other recommendations from councillors? Councillor Ney?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to put a recommendation that we look at children that are excluded from poverty in the report, and that's put in as well. Children that attend school that are excluded for poverty. Yeah.
For poverty factors?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Cresswell?
I just want to say this is absolutely, I don't know if it's appropriate for me to say so, but I think this was absolutely fascinating, really interesting. I really like the way that everyone's completely engaged with this. And a big thank you to Rob. I've heard a lot of this before because I've been at various teachers' conferences. I don't know whether it would be appropriate if people wanted to delve in and find out more, especially in terms of those predictive risk model and the work that's being done on that, whether there is some opportunity for further researching, finding out, or whatever as far as the committee is concerned. But to really say thank you very much to Rob for a fantastic presentation and dealing with all those questions so brilliantly and so professionally.
Absolutely, I endorse that wholeheartedly. I would look to asking you to come back again, Rob, if I may, so that we can have an update, a timescale to be decided by you really, when you feel that you've got enough information that shows us progress, perhaps gives us some ideas in terms of what has been provided by schools to overcome the cost of living crisis that was mentioned by Councillor Ney and by Robin in his questions. Can we make that a recommendation as well? Jake, are there any others that we haven't picked up on?
So it's just an action really for education to provide stats on children get their first choice for school placement.
So can we agree as a committee then to note the report and endorse the approach being taken? Can I see a show of hands on that, please? Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rob. Really,
thank you ever so
really
much.
Useful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to propose that we move the order of the agenda for the next items to bring forward the budget Q1 outturn position. I'm going to turn to Matt Fulton to provide us a brief summary of the report. I'm conscious that we're running slightly later than predicted in terms of the agenda. Not that I'm putting any pressure on anybody to not ask any questions at this point. Of course we're going to ask questions, but over to you, Matt.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So presented before you is the 25-26 Budget and Quarter 1 Forecast Outcome Report for Plymouth Children's Services. The document provides a financial overview of the service's performance during the first quarter of the current financial year. The report outlines the growth allocations received by the service at the start of the year alongside the saving proposals put forward by the department. It is structured to reflect the key service areas, children, young people and families, education, participation and skills, and the central spine. Key areas of focus include expenditure on CYPF placements, delivery plans, and significant budgetary movements. The Children, Young People and Families Service continue to face financial pressures due to rising costs associated with independent specialist and residential placements. These challenges are compounded by limited placement availability both within the South West region and nationally. Consequently, the authority is managing not only an increased demand for services within the city, but also higher costs per individual care package. The issue is also seen within Plymouth's short break service. To address these pressures, the department has initiated several strategic work streams, including the Family Homes Programme, an enhanced fostering and recruitment campaign, and strengthened collaboration through the Reconnect partnership. Additionally, the department has experienced staffing challenges, particularly in securing permanent appointments. As a result, agency and interim staff have been deployed to maintain service continuity in critical roles. A service redesign is currently underway to align with the expectations of the Families First partnership, with the aim of resolving recruitment issues and reducing reliance on agency staffing.
Thank you very much. Councillors, do you have any questions for Matt? Councillor Steele?
Thank you for that overview. It was helpful. I'm just looking at table, I don't know which table it is, on page 14, sorry, of the supplement. Around it says gross agency spend through quarter 1 was 0.573 million. I know obviously the aim is to reduce the number of agency staff, but I wanted to just get a feeling for, so how many agency staff did we have on the books in quarter 1? And how much were agency staff costing us on average? How much were they per agency worker? And how does that compare to the staffing costs of their comparable, permanent member of staff?
In some cases, agency staff can almost be double their permanent equivalent. And I'll get the exact figures shortly, but we more than halved our gross spend to agency providers this year compared to last year. The aim is to reduce towards, the plan was originally for 11 agency staffs by the end of the year, and that's predominantly social workers and advanced practitioners. There may be instances where we need to increase that. Of course, these are statutory roles and caseloads need to be managed. So whilst we are trying to reduce, and the aim will always be to have permanent staff, there may be instances where we are higher than that. So we have at times been at 30, getting towards 11, but we may now need to increase that number towards the end of the financial year.
I've got a few little follow-ups. So you said you'd be able to give us the data eventually. I'd also be interested to know what was the highest paid agency worker and what was their role? And do you consider, and this is an open question, I'm mostly looking at David as the strategic director. Do you think the spend on agency workers represents good value for money for council taxpayers?
Well, let me start by saying that the government has brought in from the 1st of October a cap which will be applied across the country, and we in the South West have come to an agreement with a memorandum of understanding which all of our local authorities will apply, We do have a transition period between now and the end of March, and for some of those agency staff that have been paid an existing rate, we will be mindful of that transition period through to the end of March. But certainly from March onwards, and any new social worker that comes in, they will be paid at the agency rate, the memorandum of understanding. And the purpose of that has been to get more value for money, because those caps are applied across. So it's difficult to say, isn't it, about value for money? We have to accept that there are circumstances when we do need agency social workers, because we haven't got a full complement of permanent workers. And I would say the majority of agency workers come into Plymouth, they work hard, they do good work with children and families, and they would provide good value for money. There are some exceptions when an agency worker may not, and we do have in place robust performance management processes in place. We monitor the quality of the work very closely, and if we do have concerns about the quality of the work, then we will take action, and we would, you know, ask an agency worker not to be here. Then, of course, we have to balance things, don't we? Because every time we change a social worker, that's a change for a child and a change for a family. So they're not easy decisions to make, but we're certainly very, you know, closely monitoring the quality of practice. And if it doesn't meet our expectations, then we will change that.
Can I ask one tiny follow-up? If on the MOU, so what's the new cap?
Again, we can get that information to you. If I remember rightly, for a standard social worker, it's £38 an hour, and for a team manager or the next stage up, that's £42 an hour, and the next level up in terms of management would be £45 an hour. Well remembered, David. I'm getting nods saying he's doing that right. So I have remembered that. Okay.
And what's that
so
in
that's
annual salaries, as most people would do?
Oh, that bit I can't calculate, but we can calculate it, and it will be higher than an annual salary. Because we don't have on costs, we don't pay pension, so you know we have to take those things into account as well. So I think when you do take those into account, it probably is broadly you know, comparable. What we are though encouraging is our agency workers to become permanent, and Lisa's working with our recruitment team to encourage at this point, you know, we're doing the right thing in honouring a transition period. We are saying by the time we get to the 1st of April in the new financial year, that will end and everyone will be on the rates. But we also are encouraging our agency workers to become permanent and setting out what that offer is and what the value of that is to them. But I just do recognise what Matt has said about the significant decrease in the number of agency workers that we have had, right down to 11. That is a significant achievement for the local authority in its recruitment of permanent members of staff, and it's recognising the move into the family first model, because more children and families' needs are starting to be supported by alternatively qualified workers.
Lisa, did you want to say anything? You're content with that?
I think David's pretty much covered it, but I suppose just to confirm that there is a national piece around the agency, and that was why they've kind of looked to try and manage some of the increasing costs for local authorities, and then as a region, people are all working together in the regions to come up with those caps. So hence why we've got something here ready to commence from April.
Councillor Lang, did you want to join us at this point?
Yes, hello everybody. I hope you can hear me. I've got slightly dodgy Wi-Fi, I think. Actually, David and Lisa have more or less covered everything that I was going to say. I want to reiterate that the significant reduction, and in an ideal world, of course, all your vacancies would be filled. You wouldn't have any agency staff, but you have to have a mind to not only recruitment but also retention. And if you don't have the appropriate staff in place, then obviously your permanent staff's caseloads go up, and we've done a lot of work around bringing those down, and those are reasons why people look elsewhere for other jobs. So I think it's definitely a balance, as David said, but I do think it's important to note the significant reduction that's happened since the redesign of our staffing structure, which is, as David said, it's all around the Families First partnership and how that's going to work going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from councillors? Councillor Wood?
Yes, thank you, Chair. You highlighted the new proposed rate of being £38. Now, that's obviously the starting point, but that is, you said, agreed with the other authorities, or is that agreed with the providers?
That's agreed with all of the other local authorities in the southwest, and it's consistent with the southeast and the Midlands proposals. So it's not, we employ through our own agency matrix, and we wouldn't be expecting to have high top-up fees on top of that.
Okay. The reason I ask is that 10 years ago we had a similar agreement in the southeast, and yet those costs have gone up. We agreed that we wouldn't rehire staff who went to agency and came back from Hampshire to Kent, and that didn't work. So I'm just wondering how you think having a rate here would work, or is there a risk that those people who currently work for these agencies, or indeed the agencies themselves, will simply turn around and they won't then have staff, they'll go and do something else, such as adult social care or something else. The other question I have, thank you. The other question I have is that we have had a 59% increase in the total cost in 4 years from the original budget to the budget this year, which is a £31 million increase per year. It seems enormous, but I know isn't unique just to Plymouth. But is that increase the same across the country, or are we higher than the average increase?
Yeah, so the first one is it's part of the government's drive. So this is a national piece of work that they're asking for all local authorities to undertake, managing the price caps, because otherwise what happens is local authorities increase their rates because they're struggling, and then you suddenly get a surge going over to one local authority and the others then suffer. So there has been a real push from the government to try and bring that balance across the whole system. And so that's why it's a national piece, but they've then asked for each, rather than them set the costs, what they've then given permission is for regionally, for local authorities to work together to come up with a reasonable cost so that they can still attract people, but an agreement that they will then all work together in the region, so that, for example, our colleagues in Devon or Cornwall don't then start to put those costs up. It has to be part of that agreement.
So it needs updating, but we did a big benchmarking exercise with local authorities up in the north. We have good connections with North Tyneside, so we did a big piece of work with them. Identical issues, identical budget growth, identical pressures in terms of percentage, where we had similar baseline budgets. It was almost identical to the pound, and it's the same issues. Not enough money in the budget, you build for what you know, and something comes from out of the blue that you just haven't forecast for, budgeted for. We're not alone in this problem.
Any further questions? Thank you very much. We're asked to note the report. Do we have any recommendations as well, or Councillor Steele?
I think, I'm not sure if this is a bit of a trivial recommendation, but I think we should, because I do remember having this conversation with David last year, I do think we should note the progress that has been made in terms of that reduction in the use of agency workers, because there is you can see a genuine, clear improvement. So I think that's worth noting, that sort of improvement somehow in the recommendations.
Anything else, Jake? Okay, thank you. So can we agree to note the report and acknowledge the reduction in agency staff and the work that has gone to create that situation? Show of hands, please. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on, going back to that other item on the agenda that we skipped over, the Send Area Local Improvement Plan, which is in the supplement pack that was circulated. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Cresswell to introduce the report.
Right, thank you very much, Chair. The report presents a detailed update on the progress of Plymouth's Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Send Local Area Improvement Plan, reflecting the local area's ongoing commitment to improving our outcomes for our children and our young people with Send. We very much, as a local authority, Send has become everyone's concern, everyone's top priority. And I'm very gratified in the way that so many of our, in fact, all of our elected members have really so much engaged with that and the incredible work of our officers, and particularly as far as Lisa is concerned. It focuses on, although two key areas. It's the enhancement of the education, health and care plans, EHCP processes, and also the strategic development of Send capital projects to increase sufficiency and support right across the city. The report outlines improvements in statutory compliance and decision-making, timeliness and quality assurance, alongside strengthened communications with families and professionals. And I would certainly say I can reiterate that really strongly in terms of the anecdotal evidence, but the fact that the number of parents and carers and such and complaints that have come directly to me as in my capacity have declined considerably, and also as well, whenever there has been an issue that's been raised, it's been dealt with very, very quickly, sort of like immediate response, and that has had such a fantastic impact on, I think, parental and carers' confidence, and also the confidence of our schools and our education providers. It also highlights the implementation of targeted funding and outreach initiatives designed to reduce reliance on EHCPs and independent placements. In addition, the capital programme update details progress against the multi-year Send sufficiency strategy, including the creation of new specialist places and the planning of future provision to meet growing demand. Together, these developments demonstrate a robust and coordinated approach to Send improvements aligned with national reforms and local strategic priorities. And I'm going to just quickly mention here, though we haven't covered it in detail here, is about the GATI, which is the Graduate Approach to Improvement to Inclusion, and the fact that we, as an authority, were shortlisted for the National Association for Special Educational Needs Awards, and we came runner-up, and we're talking about hundreds of providers who actually are involved in these occasions. So that's something really to be commended very much for, and the incredible work that that Lisa has done on that. And I think also to bear in mind that having had such an approach, you're already seeing how that also is improving confidence in terms of schools, in terms of parents, and provision for our children. So thank you very much, and I leave this report to you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from officers? Please.
Just make one comment that the work is the genuine commitment of the whole partnership, and we've got Hannah on the line tonight, and it's been a really fabulous journey, and one that we've done together, and one that we've been commended for doing together so strongly. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I'm sure Hannah would as well.
Excellent. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Taylor first, Councillor Steele after.
Me first. It's nice to see the fleshed out figures of the impact of the duty call system. It's obviously making a massive difference. It's nice to see a few more months data to support that. What there is no mention of in this report is the situation with tribunals. So understand that the previous tribunal officer has not been employed since early July, and that left just one TO for the entirety of tribunal appeals and mediations for the council. I think that's now been put right. I think somebody has now started. But my question is around what mitigations have been put in place to address the impact that that's had on parents during that period from the start of July to the new person starting. So, for example, where documentation has not been produced by the LA to be provided at tribunal, has had quite a knock-on effect on parents that are waiting for hearings, waiting for documentation to be provided, and then obviously the disappointment that comes with things not being produced, delays, etc. So what mitigations have been put in place to address specifically in those 3 months or so those parents affected?
Yeah, so we've always had a consistent senior tribunal officer. It was the second tribunal officer we moved to a different local authority. In that time, we redirected EHCP officers who prepare the bundles in the background. They don't necessarily have the legal training, and we've met as many deadlines as we possibly can. So I would get the figures for you, but there hasn't been a miss of huge range of tribunals because of that gap. What we've done is put in some capacity to prepare the bundles in the background to be able to continue to support, and we've now got recruited. One of our EHCP officers has moved over as a tribunal officer, so we have 2 full-time tribunal officers at the moment.
I'm glad that there's not many, but I know there are some, and that they're the ones that I'm interested in, is specifically what support has been put in place for parents who have been affected by missed deadlines. During the tribunal
I really
process.
can't speak about specifics, but they've been rectified as quickly as possible, and they've been sorted. So we're talking about a matter of days in a couple of those.
Thank you. Councillor Steele?
Thank you, Chair. In the report, it said that as of August, there's 263 young people on the waiting list to be allocated for an educational psychologist. It goes on to briefly explain kind of the risk mitigations that are in place, which is developing a long-term assistant EP role and a business case to increase agency support. So my question, probably for David, is what are the kind of additional actions you're taking to avoid, we're getting in the right direction on agency workers for sort of social workers. Are we going to end up with a similar problem on requiring long-term agency support on educational psychologists, and what are you doing to stop that from happening?
I will hand over to Lisa for the detail because she's managing that. But you are right, yes. So we have done, very well in terms of the social work because of, again, a national shortage of EPs and a shortage particularly in the southwest. Then we do have a challenge around being able to allocate EP assessments to a trained and qualified EP. But we do have a whole range of things in place to try and mitigate that for parents and for children.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll just echo that. We've got a massive shortage of EPs nationally and locally. We've got lots of vacancies, so we do have to use agency, and what we try and use more are locums, who are like the retired educational psychologists, or those who choose to do a couple of assessments across a month period. So we're doing as much as we can across the network of EPs, knowing EPs who've retired, to bring on locums, which makes it better for us, and it's better for the children and young people as well. Where we have to, we use agency, but that's why we've put in the business case to really think about our assistant EPs, because they're our current psychology students who are at Plymouth University, who can then step into those posts, and then we can grow our own. And we've got some really great keen interest from those students who are currently associates with us, and they come in to do little pieces of work, who really want to step into that space. So that's one piece of work. And then it's the general sense efficiency of reducing demand and putting more support into mainstream schools at the earliest opportunity, with all of the work we're doing around targeted support, the graduated approach. So that what we're doing then is reducing that need for a crisis level escalation towards education, health and care plans. So all of that together is trying to mitigate that risk of using the agency workers.
just would finalise that and say, you know, we can't underestimate the challenge, and it is a challenge, and it does then have an impact on the timeliness of assessments and the timeliness of plans, and indeed the timeliness of intervention. So it is a significant challenge, but you know, I hope that gives some confidence about how we are addressing that.
That does. I mean, because it's one of those things when we look at that and it's 263 people, that's 263 young people. It's their, you know, their real people, their lives and their families. So it is reassuring to hear the kind of long-term strategic approach you're taking there, particularly with engaging with the university and building that pipeline. And obviously looking at things like how do we actually avoid people going into crisis. So that's really helpful to understand.
Thank you. Councillor Wood?
Thank you, Chair. We know that councils have 20 weeks to issue the HCP. However, there was a BBC report last month that stated that Plymouth was the 5th worst in the country at meeting that target. So even after the work you've highlighted, is that the case? And whilst I note the total increase in the HCPs as listed in the report, they're meant to be reviewed every 12 months and every 6 months for under 5s. Is that happening, or are we so focused on developing the HCPs that we're missing those reviews?
Yeah, that data is true, and that's sort of data from some years ago. What we had when I started in post was quite a large backlog, and so what we've spent the year doing is making sure that we have all our systems processes in place. We've now issued over 700 plans within a year, and that is a massive achievement. And if we hadn't had the backlog, we would be steaming towards the 20-week 100%. So it is a really difficult challenge with the EPs to meet that 20 weeks. But now that we've reduced that backlog, we're now moving towards that 20-week goal, which is fantastic and which is moving into that space. Annual reviews. Again, we were in a situation when I stepped into post where they hadn't been done for a significant period of time in many year groups and cases. So we've got a recovery plan underway for our annual reviews. So we've increased the team. So we've got annual reviewing officers. Each school has now got an allocated annual reviewing officer, and we're sort of progressing those plans live as they now come in. So it wouldn't be right for us to go back. So when a plan has not been reviewed for some years, to go back and do that, we're using all of that information and the updated plan and then producing those live. We're now attending emergency annual reviews and urgent ones that are called by schools, and that consistent member of staff is doing that. So it is going to take some time to recover, but we've got a tracker where we'll be able to look at the trajectory, and we're tracking that month on month now, and there's a really clear plan in place. But it is going to take some time to recover because of them not being done for some time before that.
Can I just check my understanding on that? Thank you. Because they've taken so long to go through and do the review of the existing HCPs, if I think I understood you, correct me if I'm wrong, we're not going back and reviewing them on an annual basis because they're too old to do so. We're doing them retrospectively, or what do you mean by doing them live?
No, I mean,
Help
like,
me
so
out.
say there's a young person who hasn't had the review done from last year for about 2 years, for example, and there were children in the system like that. What we haven't gone is gone back to that 2 year ago plan and updated that, gone back to the year plan and updated that. We've taken all of that information into context, got their most recent one that has come through live, and used all of that information in the most recent to make sure it's as up to date as it possibly can, and then it goes out to the young person. So what we can't do is go right back and do every single annual review that's been missed over the period of time they were missed. But what we can do now is process them all in live time with all of the information that we have and all of the most relevant and up-to-date information, so that the young people have what they need now. And that's why we have increased demand on special provision, for example, and increased demand on sort of budget uplifts and top-up funding, because we're processing so many more annual reviews. So all of those requests are moving through the system.
Any further questions? Councillor Noble.
I was watching the Panorama was a documentary, I suppose, on the EHCPs, and a lot of the parents, they want help for their child, and I think that was mentioned the last Scrutiny committee, they've got the targeted I've just lost the targeted support program. What has that had success in getting people, children help, without people going through the process of perhaps quite a lengthy process if it's 20 weeks and the show people, parents if struggling to wade through that whilst trying to look after a child with additional need and all the rest of it. So could you, how's that been going?
Absolutely, it's going really well. So that's the work around the graduated approach that we've put in and really secured the targeted level. So we had 5 pilot schools go live in April, and we monitored those and the impact of those in the summer term. And we saw increased engagement, a significant reduction in sort of behaviour points that schools track. And then we've got some parental testimonials that we've added to our SEF and impact statement, where parents were really saying it's an amazing impact now for their children being able to access school and feel well supported. We had 30 schools go live now on the 1st of September, or the 5th when the schools returned, and we're just about to do the autumn reviews of those. So they've got a peer support monitoring group in place and us as the local authority to monitor, which will be great. And then in addition, we've got the special school outreach that has expanded, and we're looking at how we can further that and really make some impact there as well. So some fantastic first steps of progress, and we're going to be pulling through regular reports that we can then add to the reports that come to you as councillors as well.
Any other questions? Councillor Crystal?
I was just going to add that sort of creativity in a sense, the GATI, the targeted support, the way that we're trying to overcome the problem of shortage, which is a national shortage of EPs, all of those things, working together, working as well as we are with Hannah and colleagues and such. This is really, really important stuff, and we're in a very, very different position to where we were when I first took over this role, which would have been just under two and a half years ago. And it's probably worthwhile with, that there's obviously still, you can see there's still more to do, and we're really ambitious, as I said earlier, but it's useful, I think, to actually look back and see what the baseline was and how far we've actually come, and that's due to all colleagues and such who have worked so well, and working with Hannah and colleagues as well has been really, really, really productive.
Thank you very much. Hannah, would you like to say anything at this point? You've just been...
I just wanted to come in to say that I thoroughly echo the fact that it's been a pleasure working in partnership in Plymouth, and our health providers have been incredibly collaborative. So for every one of those extra plans that's been issued by the local authority, there's a health assessment or two sitting behind that has also been kept up with and delivered in a timely way. And it really, if we're going to get things right for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities, we all have to share that commitment to doing the very best we can and to stretching ourselves constantly to aspire to the next level. And there are a couple of things that I think have been exceptional about the journey in Plymouth, and one of those has been mentioned over and over again, but that is the partnership, and the other is the alignment in terms of the strategic approach. So where that kind of real commitment to providing early help and support in schools has been rolled out, as Lisa and Rob earlier has described. That's also being driven through the health system as well. So self-referral to be able to access early help and support for speech and language therapy and for emotional health and well-being, and a continued investment in the mental health support in schools teams so that we can get that rolled out to 100% coverage in the city. And there's so much that I could say, but I just wanted to echo the thoughts around the strength of the partnership and the real tangible progress that's been made, and how brilliant that families are coming back to say that they are actually being able to see how it makes a difference for them and their children.
Thank you very much. That's really good to hear. And we've heard about some really creative ways of addressing some of the issues. Councillor Taylor, would you have a question?
Yes, a little question that I forgot to ask, which is on a different topic of capital, the SEND capital. That little asterisk in the Deliver New Special School that says this project will exceed the capital funds available and will require additional investment reminded me of the letter that we were going to write, which is on the action log, but I don't think is gone. Obviously, there has now been a reshuffle. Councillor Creswell mourns the loss of Stephen Morgan from his previous role. She is devastated. But perhaps that reshuffle offers a fresh opportunity to pick up that letter and send it, because they're taking a while to come back now. They're obviously inundated, so the sooner we get it in, the better.
I completely agree with that, and that will happen. And also, we did a little postcard to Bridget Phillipson as well, which you may be aware, which had that ask on it.
Thank you very much. So as we come to the end of this item, are there any recommendations from councillors going forward? I would just like to say, on behalf of the panel, thank you, Lisa, for your commitment and your improvement work in the city. And councillors, if you didn't know, sadly, Lisa is leaving us soon-ish in November, and you're off to Dubai, but you're going back into a school, so that's good news. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so I know from people that I've spoken to in my ward, the work that you've done has been amazing. So thank you very much for all that you've done. We wish you well. Okay. Okay, so in terms of
recommendation then that somebody barricades the border.
We need to look at recommendations. I've got one formally written down, which is recommended the progress, key challenges and priorities for the next quarter are noted. Anything else, Jack? We're happy with that? So we note the report and we note what I've just said. Hands up. Excellent. Thank you very much. Brilliant. So we're moving on to the Child Exploitation Annual Report. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Lang to introduce the report, and I know, Martine, you're going to contribute too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just for a bit of context, child exploitation in this context refers to situations where children and young people are manipulated, coerced, or forced into activities for the benefit of others. And this can include sexual exploitation, criminal exploitation, like being involved in gangs or drug trafficking, and other forms of abuse. And we take child exploitation in Plymouth very, very seriously and offer a very robust safeguarding response. And we work very closely with our colleagues in the child-centred policing team and our schools to reduce or mitigate risk. Missing episodes, as they're called, are a key indicator of vulnerability, and they often correspond with exploitation risks. But it's also important to say that not all children who go missing are at risk of extrafamilial harm. So just some stats in the previous 12 months, September 24 to August 25, there were 905 missing episodes reported to the police involving 612 children. This has seen a reduction on the same period in the previous year, which was 1,095 episodes involving 679 children. While on the face of it, that appears a small reduction, it is a very, very welcome one, and it is certainly going in the right direction. So, and Martine will talk more about this, but we continue to find new and creative and innovative ways to work alongside our children and families. And our response to children who are known to be at risk of exploitation is good, but we still want to go further and do more in the preventative space, working with our partners and communities to feel confident to recognise when a child may be at risk of harm outside the home, and how we can all respond in a timely and effective way to prevent that risk increasing for any of our children. Thank you, Chair.
Martin, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm just mindful of time, so I'm happy to take questions. I'm sure there will be some.
There will, and I'm going to ask my question first, if I may. In the report, there's a table that says missing children by month and gender, and it gives an overview of the last year. And in September 24 through to August 25, that table starts with boys mostly missing, but by August 25, it's mostly girls. So are you aware of why that's significantly changed?
So we actually picked this up a little while ago, and we've started to just track this, and we've tracked it back over the last couple of years, and what we're seeing is the very similar pattern every year. So the very basics for us are, is this, what's this about in relation to, is there something about gender and about children, girls being reported missing more often than boys because people might feel that they're more at risk? Or was there an issue around the weather? We even went back to that. Just, girls prefer to go out when it's warmer than boys, and boys are happier to go out when it's colder. But actually what we can't see is anything, but we see the same pattern over the last 2 or 3 years. So we're doing some work with the participation team just to really think with our children, our young people, about why we see that change in the year. And it is a consistent change. So the run up to Christmas, we see more boys. The run up to summer, we see more girls.
And is that the same young people, or is it different boys, different girls?
So what we know, and I can pull this data up and make it a bit more clearer for people, what we know is that we have more episodes, obviously, than we have young people. So we have repeat patterns of our young people going missing. Some of those young people are children in our care when things have got tricky for them, and that's their response to that trickiness, and we have to do some work with them around that. But the majority of our young people are the children that we are concerned about, and that those children that are most at risk of exploitation are the ones that go repeatedly missing. So you'll see a specific cohort of young people over a period of time that are going missing more often until we get in there. So working with our adolescents is really tricky. They don't want to engage with us. For lots of them, they don't think or feel like they're at risk. So actually, it's all about the persistence of the team. So that's sometimes what we will see is a persistent pattern missing until we can get in, until we get alongside, and then we see that tail off. And then we get a new cohort of young people, sadly, that come through the same in the same pattern. So we see it going up with repeated episodes and then dropping back down again.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Steele?
Just a quick question, which kind of goes back to one of the previous agenda items and the kind of work that the council's doing to work on prevention and early intervention. Well, we already can see here that there's a lot of data collected. So is there any kind of similar thoughts around something like the kind of absence data where they was using a kind of predictive risk model? Is there any of that happening already, or is there any plans on the horizon? Because it was really interesting in the bit about the daily intelligence briefing, the fact that they on the example of mapping and disruption, saying about drug supply in an area, etc. I'm assuming that your teams are collecting an enormous amount of data, and it's like what's going on to kind of that analysis piece to try and be a bit more on the front foot. So I'd be interested to hear your reflections on that.
So we do collect a huge amount of data on a daily basis, and so the daily intelligence briefing tells us and gives us an indication of young people who are at significant risk. So we talk about every child who's been missing the night before, every child who's been in custody the day before, every child who has been referred through to us because there are concerns about exploitation. But what we know about exploitation is it's hidden. So we get a tiny amount of information, and it's really hard to get young people to trust us enough to give us that information. So this work, it often feels like we're on the back foot and we're chasing, the changes in the way people work to exploit young people. And once we find a theme and then we address that theme and we combat it, they find another theme, and we're constantly working our ways and working with our young people to get that information through to us. But we are really lucky to have a child-centred policing team
who have really been creative in the way that they gather intelligence from the communities as well, to be able to inform us and keep us up to date with what's going on across the city. But we need to strengthen that, and we are good, and we have a really strong, robust sort of way of working with those children that we know about. What we've got to be much better at is identifying those children that are on the cusp of exploitation and on the cusp of the criminal justice system, and the children that our communities are worried about but don't quite know what to do with that information. And that has to be the next phase of work we are. And I'm really lucky to be been given the permissions to do that, and the local authority are committed to us being able to go ahead and really try to expand that work across our communities. And I'm talking about our communities as well as our partners, because actually it's our communities that are going to make a difference in this space, because they're the people who are going to feed us the information that we need to know so that we can address it.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Last year, the council bought the Royal Building for £5 million with the promise that the plan application we put forward at the beginning of this year for it to convert into temporary accommodation for homelessness families. Now, this hasn't happened. On page 72 of this report, it states that these crucial services recognise that children who present as homeless enter the criminal justice system are on the edge of care, often due to family breakdown, are at increased risk of going missing and being exploited. So given this planned facility hasn't yet come online, is there a risk that we don't have facilities available for those people who are presenting as homeless? And is this risking an increase in people going missing and being exploited?
We always need more resource for our young people, especially our 16 and 17-year-old homelessness. So my specialist team work with our 16 and 17-year-old homelessness. I haven't got the exact figures today, but 2 years ago we really changed the way we work with those young people, because we understood that for those young people there'll be a whole myriad of vulnerabilities and issues, and they are across the board. So there is plans for us to really pull our criminal justice system, our edge of care teams, our 16 and 17-year-old homeless team, and our Be Safe team all together, expand that resource for us to be able to put in a range of offers for our children who are in these situations for us. We actually now, today, are able to work really closely with our families and work in a preventative way to get children back home when they present as homeless, because 16 and 17-year-old children should never be presenting homeless to a local authority. They should be at home with their parents where that's safe to do. And over the last 6 months, we have had, I can't remember off the top of my head how many presentations, and suddenly it's far too many. But of those presentations, only 4 of those have actually had to come into our care. We've been able to work with the family and the wider community to get them home. And I feel really proud about that, because actually that's the best place for our children. So whilst we always need more resource, and of course we do, and for some young people the best place for them is to come into our care actually, because that's right and proper, and because they need to be safeguarded. But for the majority, we need to work closely and better with their families to get them home.
Thank you, that's a really thorough answer. Am I correct in thinking that was the homelessness team meant to be moving into that building? So there was a hub that people could attend, or was that not the case?
I don't know the detail of that. That is managed by another department, so I can't answer the question, but I'm sure we could get you an answer to that from the right directorate. It would come into another scrutiny panel. Could I just mention in this context the work of Young Devon? So we do work in partnership with Young Devon, and we have worked with them to commission more and more places and opportunities for young people. So that is another positive provider in the city that we have got, that we're in a strategic relationship with and commissioning places for. And Young Devon do provide both accommodation and support for young people. So again, that's positive.
Councillor Nay.
Thank you, Chair. This is my first year on the Children and Young Persons panel. Could you just enlighten me? Does Plymouth have an issue with grooming gangs?
It's really hard to say because they're very clever. So the last time that we had a conversation with our child centre policing team, they're very, very good at keeping us up to date with these things. We had, I think there was 7 lines, what we call lines, county lines into Plymouth. The majority of those county lines came from either Manchester or London. so we know where they're coming from. That changes regularly. They're very, very clever people, and moving and changing the way that they work with our young people. But one line is a problem. So I suppose it's sort of irrelevant how many of them there are. Every time we hear about it, we have to think about how we disrupt that, and how we think about push-pull factors for our young people and be able to draw them back in. And actually, the work with our schools and the work with our communities is all about fighting what they can offer with something better that we can offer for them.
Just another quick question. So would you, as on the panel, would you welcome the government's national inquiry into grooming gangs?
I welcome anything that helps raise the awareness of this issue across the city. Our communities and our families need to understand that this is small. We are a relatively safe city in Plymouth, and we have a good child-centred policing team. And so these concerns aren't massive or widespread across Plymouth. But like I said, any one child who's impacted is one child too many.
And that sense of belonging that we were talking about earlier in the meeting is absolutely fundamental to this item. I have another question, which is around the pie chart in the report that's missing children by postal district. And clearly, as a ward councillor, I look to the predominant postcode that represents Egg Buckland Ward. And I'm sure my colleague to my left would have done the same thing. And I noted that PL4 and PL5 are, for me, areas of concern. Are there any reasons why that have been identified that those two postcodes seem to be more of a concern, perhaps? I hear what you say earlier about one child being sufficient, but that's a number.
So we've done quite a lot of work on this to really think about, with our schools in those areas, to think about, do we have an issue here, and is there a theme for these particular postcodes? And actually what it boils down to, I believe, but we are going to just finalise this analysis, is that it is a bigger area. So PL5 is 2 times the size of, well, it's twice the size of PL1 and PL2. So I think it's proportions. But I just want to make sure that we absolutely don't have an issue. What we will do is we will, when we see a theme in a particular area, we'll work with those schools and those secondary schools in that particular area to really think about how we can raise awareness around missing, exploitation, etc. in those spaces. And that's the stuff that we need to strengthen in our preventative space now, that becomes a sustainable offer and happens all the time. But to just ease your minds, my understanding is those areas are more densely populated by families, and therefore they just have more children in those areas.
And so would it help, similarly from a previous conversation, having actual numbers in brackets around the pie chart might give us a more of a picture? Yeah, thank you. Any other questions, comments from councillors? Councillor McNamara.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go back to that pie chart, there's an outside Plymouth segment. Now, obviously, if it was everybody outside Plymouth, it'd be 99.9% of the pie chart. Is it a certain particular area, and why is it included in the Plymouth pie chart?
So they will be our children in our care, so Plymouth children who don't live in Plymouth.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much. I found this report really, really useful. Lots of really good information in it, and a never-ending battle. So thank you for all the work that goes into this. I have in front of me, in terms of recommendation, for the panel to note the information contained within the report and endorse the continued work of the service to provide a response to children who go missing and are at risk of harm outside the home. So we're happy to accept that. Any other recommendations councillors want to raise at this point? Okay, can I see a show of hands on that, please? Thank you very much. Thank you, Martine. So moving on, in the final stretch, item 10 is the performance scorecard. I'm going to hand over to, magically appeared on the screen, Paul Stevens. Excellent, I'm glad you're there. Thank you very much for joining us to address us on this, please.
Yeah, hi there, panel. So you should have in front of you the Q1 report, Q1 covering April through to June. Obviously not enough time to turn around Q2, which only finished just over a week ago. we've gone through the report. We've up the key things to notice is we've updated the statistical neighbours. The DfE have revisited their statistical neighbours, and to help, hopefully, the very last annex of the report shows you who they are now. So that's one thing we've added. We've added some additional indicators into the education participation and skills section. And just to remind councillors, and I'll make the offer again, is the Annex 2, Section 4, gives you some alternative links to data, which has our published information, which you can compare against other neighbours, other authorities, the England average, and it provides a host of back series for an awful lot of measures as well. And I've made the offer before that I'm very happy to sit with councillors or have Teams meeting to take them through that tool or tools to show you how it works. I think those are the main changes in the reports. Happy to take any questions from a technical point of view, and then you've got our senior officers from Children's Services if there's any service queries you've got.
Thank you. I have a question about the statistical neighbours. On what basis were those changes made?
Yeah, so it's extremely complicated, and if I said I understand completely how the DfE come up with these statistical neighbours, I would be lying. What it's basically doing is it's looking at all the authorities across England and seeing which councils have similar characteristics, and that could be around populations, not necessarily locations, but university, ports. It takes into lots of different things, deprivation of indices of deprivation. So it will take in lots of different things and then see which of the 150 plus authorities are closest to us in those characteristics. What's interesting is it could be that none of our statistical neighbours, we are the next closest to them. It's very, very how they do it, I do not know, but DfE will have a formula that looks at all the characteristics of all the different councils and tell us which ones are our closest. That doesn't really give you the detail. I can see if I can find more detailed information on how they do it, if you think that would be useful. I just know it's very complicated.
Thank you for explaining that, and it's interesting to see that Cornwall and Torbay are listed as our neighbours and our statistical neighbours, so that might prove quite fruitful going forward in terms of sharing good practice. Do any other councillors have questions?
On exactly this same.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On exactly the same topic, I don't know how we came to the same one, but I did exactly that. I looked on the tool and say Dudley, Gateshead and Medway do not list us as their statistical neighbours. So it would be useful and perhaps a recommendation if we could just understand slightly more how the DfE come up with this, because some of the other ones do list us. I think Wakefield list us, but those ones don't. I'd just be interested.
Yeah, and I think, Councillor, last year before they changed them, I don't think we appeared in any of our stat neighbours groups. So it's yeah, I will take that as an action and see if I can find some more detailed explanation. But I want to warn councillors that it is quite complicated when I've tried to understand it myself in the past. But I will try and find that for you.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Any other questions from councillors? So we have a recommendation based on Councillor Wood's question, and we need to note the attached briefing paper for information and discussion. Jake, did you catch the wording from?
It was just along the lines of how did the DfE come up with the statistical neighbour definition?
Thank you very much. So we're happy to accept this report. Show of hands, please. Show you're still alive. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 11, the action log. Are there any issues people wish to raise from the action log? Councillor Taylor, did you raise something earlier that we need to go back to?
It was on the letter about capital spend.
That's obviously noted and will be addressed. No other issues? And in terms of the work programme, are there any other items people wish to put onto the work programme going forward? Happy with those as suggestions? And obviously, Councillor Wood and I will work with officers to make sure that the next scrutiny has a varied and interesting programme for us. I would like to note that the next meeting is on the 3rd of December, just because I think it's not necessarily accurate on what we've got in front of us. Any other issues? Any other matters? Wow. We've done well. We were 20 minutes behind at one point in the meeting and I thought we were struggling. We're actually, Jake predicted that we would finish at 8:15 and we're finishing at 8:15. So well done, Jake. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Jemima. Thank you for sticking with us.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.